Welcome to the Business Growth Spotlight, where we shine the light and talk with business leaders from all over the world who are here sharing their expertise and wisdom so we can all grow together. I'm your host, Heidi Schalk, co-founder of HLH Growth Solutions. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm really excited to have you here. And I'm excited to be introducing my guest here today, who is Matt DiMarsico with US LaunchingPad. So welcome, Matt, to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Glad to be here.
It's excited to have you here. So Matt, can you share with us a little bit about yourself, about USA LaunchingPad and your role within the company?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Matt DiMarsico. I'm the co-founder at USA LaunchingPad. I spent the first 20 plus years of my career building and scaling sales and marketing teams for what I define as disruptive tech companies. That definition of disruptive tech changes over time. What was disruptive 20 years ago is not necessarily disruptive anymore. But fundamentally, these are technologies that change the way we work and or live. And I've built 4 of those companies to exit. And each time, oddly, I was acquired by a foreign, what's called a PTT, a telco. So, and in that time, once I was acquired, because I had run sales and marketing, they put me in charge of taking portfolio items that hadn't yet expanded into the US for them. They gave those to me to expand into the US. So I built a really good playbook on internationalization and regional expansion. And about 6 years ago, a gentleman that I went to get my MBA with at SMU in Dallas is a Swiss guy, and he's built incubators and accelerators that helped companies develop disruptive tech. And he was recruited to come back to the US to build a smart cities incubator between the city of San Francisco, UC Berkeley, and McKinsey, the consulting company. And in that time, he started getting a bunch of inquiries from the companies he helped with the same problem. And this is the problem that we actually solve at USA LaunchingPad, which is, I'm doing great in my home country or in my home region, but my playbook's not quite translating and my growth is stalled into the US. Can you help? And that's what we've done at USA LaunchingPad. We help international startups and scale-ups successfully expand into the US market. And what makes us different is that we don't just help companies enter the US, we help them figure out how to actually win here. And, a lot of companies, as I said, assume that if they've been successful in Europe or another region, they can simply replicate that strategy in America. But the US market really does behave differently. Buyers think differently, sales cycles are different, messaging is different, and even the way people buy technology can vary significantly. So our role is to really bridge that gap. And we work with companies across AI and SaaS and fintech and IoT and medtech to help them validate product market fit, identify the right buyer personas, refine the messaging, and build demand generation systems to create a scalable go-to-market in the US. And in many ways, we act as both a strategic advisor and an execution partner. And I and Gert co-founded USA LaunchingPad 6 years ago.
Sharing all of that, and you answered a lot of my questions that I actually had for you. Which is fantastic and gave me a lot of clarity. And you said something that was intriguing to me. First of all, I love what you're doing because we've spoken with over 200 founders, CEOs, and people in business on this podcast alone, and some of them are international, and they're trying to break into the U.S. market. And it's a different way of marketing when it comes to reaching the U.S. market. But this is a market that you want to be reaching because, we in the US, people spend money, right? We spend money when it hits a need that we want to solve, a problem we want to solve, we will spend the money on it. So you had mentioned that the messaging is different, that there's a lot of differences compared to other countries. So can you share what some of those differences are? Because that could actually support, some of these USA businesses too, understanding the differences between USA messaging and the messaging that's happening overseas or even that target market.
Yeah. So, and our methodology works regardless of where you are. And really, this is based on design thinking principles, which, was developed at Stanford. And it really just is a fancy way of saying test and iterate, right? And what we find is, many founders initially believe that they have sort of a lead generation or a sales outreach problem, right? But after working together, we often discover the real issue is positioning, right? ICP alignment, messaging, pricing, and even targeting, the wrong buyer. And so in the US specifically, you have to answer three questions to really position yourself well. It's the why you, and why now. And it has to be presented in a way that is compelling to a US buyer. And in the US, we prefer a storyline as opposed to what I call show up and throw up, facts and features and statistics, right? We want to know why. And then again, not just the why. Part of it is, understanding how a US buyer interprets the problem that you're solving and the way that you're solving it, right? And then engaging with them directly in that same vein. So, we work with our customers to develop insight interviews that they actually have with prospective buyers. And when you start asking the same questions in the same way, over and over, you start seeing patterns pretty quickly. And we work within a 12-point go-to-market framework to identify components of your product, of your ideal customers, and of the companies that you're going to work within. And so, to boil it down simply, it's ask the questions of your buyers, don't assume, and test and iterate. And that really does enable you to position correctly.
Are there certain industries or stages of business growth where you're seeing clients getting the biggest results?
So yeah, specifically now, AI is getting a ton of capitalization. And so, they're and it is such a market in its infancy, so to speak, that really identifying the value in AI is where I see a lot of the gains that these companies are making. And we use AI across research and market analysis and outbound personalization and strategic planning and content generation, et cetera, et cetera. But, what we find is, the companies in the AI space really need to position what they're doing uniquely, right? Because it has to, again, solve a material problem. And one of the biggest issues we're finding with AI companies is, their prospects understand they need to use AI, but they don't necessarily understand the how yet. And so that's really a big piece of the positioning.
So as you brought up AI, so I want to talk about that. A lot of companies are excited about AI, but like you said, they're struggling with the implementation. So where do you see businesses getting stuck when trying to implement AI or integrate AI into operations, marketing, or their growth strategies?
I think the companies that struggle with AI are often trying to replace strategy with automation. And the companies that are actually succeeding with AI are using it to amplify strategic thinking, not eliminate it. It's a tool. And so, for us, AI works best when paired with experience and context and real world market feedback, right? And honestly, one of the biggest opportunities right now is that AI is leveling the playing field for smaller companies. So, a startup with the right systems, can now execute at a level that previously required a much larger team. And so it's really, making sure that you're using it not to replace, but to enhance a lot of your processes and workflows.
Many businesses, they'll know, and I see this across the board, and I'm sure you see it too. Like they're really good at what they do, and they know what they should do as far as like the steps they take to reach their goals, but they struggle with implementation. So why do you think execution becomes such a bottleneck as companies are growing?
Some of this, I believe, has to do with just plain old staffing, right? You as a small company, you have a lot of people wearing a lot of hats and not necessarily experts in everything that they're doing, but given resource constraints, have to do a lot of things. My first role was in program management, project management, and got a certification in that as early on in my career. And I think it's one of the things that has helped me the most throughout my career in trying to, everything that you can do can be developed in a project plan, right? And I think with a lot of execution, there's such a stress on time to market in whatever that is, right? That the step back to plan and do that appropriately is often the step that's missed, and that leads to a lot of failure and or rework, not necessarily failure, but increase in time to market. One of the things that we specifically do at USA LaunchingPad is we try to de-risk and accelerate market entry by taking a step back and testing before you come to market. And with startups and or scale ups, that speed is one of the top priorities for the company and for their boards, right? Get to revenue, get to market share. And what we find is that with a step back and a thoughtful, taking an extra 3 months and really understanding the market dynamics and understanding, how your prospect is interpreting how you're solving the problem that pains them, really over time gains you 6 to 18 months in traction. And so I would say one of the biggest challenges to execution is really taking the time to plan, is what I would say.
And it's important because a lot of us just want to go, go, go. And it's important that we're like taking that time to actually like think about, okay, where do we want to go? And then, reverse engineer it, for lack of better words, to how are we going to get there? So I'm curious for you and your business with your business partner on your growth. So what are you all doing right now to move your business forward and continue growing your company?
Yeah, great question. What's working extremely well for us right now is again insight-driven outreach and highly targeted positioning. I truly believe the old spray and pray outbound models are becoming less effective. And what's working right now is relevance. So instead of sending generic sales messages, we focus heavily on identifying very specific market signals, industry pain points, and even, strategic timing triggers, intent. For example, for ourselves, and even if we're working, let's say, with a fintech company, we tailor outreach based on regulatory shifts, operational inefficiencies, AI adoption pressures, staffing challenges, right? These the things that are happening within a specific vertical, and that creates a much stronger engagement because the conversations feel contextual rather than transactional. I think the second thing, working well is combining digital outreach with human insight. Again, get back to this, AI doesn't replace, it enhances. And AI and automation can help scale research and personalization and operational efficiency, but relationships still close deals, right? So the winning formula right now is blending automation and authentic human experience and expertise. And that's what's working for us at the moment.
The beginning of our conversation, you shared you've done a lot. You've prepped 4 exits, right? You prepared four companies for exiting, which is incredible. You have had to navigate a lot of, especially in tech changes a lot, and I'm sure it's evolved around over the years. So can you share with us what are some of the biggest challenges you faced while building the business, and how have you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, that's we struggled like other companies, especially in the consulting and advisory and even international expansion space, like many founders. And initially, we believed the problem was lead generation or sales outreach, right? But after really looking at it, you do have to understand that you need to educate your buyer and understand and help them understand how you're going to help them differently. Otherwise, you're one of the masses. And so we had to develop frameworks to help us adapt faster. I mentioned some of them earlier, right? And as we started to grow, again, speed became the driving factor, right? We had to do more, hire people, build software and tech platforms. And oftentimes we got caught up in the problems that I mentioned, which is, we didn't take enough of time to actually plan out not just the why we're doing what we're doing, but what the ideal outcome should look like, right? And then what are the KPIs that we should be looking at along the way to make sure that we're doing this correctly. And, we had a couple of our first automation projects, right? We thought, we're picking somewhat of the simplistic workflows, right? This is stuff that, I'm not going to bite off a huge chunk. I'm going to do something simple. And what we realized pretty quickly is trying to identify every edge case associated with even a simple process is really, really difficult to do. And so the testing and QA piece of that automation lasted way, way, way longer. And even as it went into production, it broke way more than we had expected. And it's because that's the nature of automation. And, that became, again, more evidence to step back, take a little time in the planning, a little more than you would actually almost desire sometimes, to make sure that you're identifying all of the right aspects to be successful. And so that was some of the biggest challenges for us. And I would say we're not unique in that, right? I think, and especially now, I'm coming back to AI a lot in the conversation. It's obviously top of mind, but this is where that, the AI automation piece comes in. Everybody's looking at ways to do things quicker with, less input. And until you really understand what you're trying to get out of it, a lot of what you're going to do is going to be ineffective.
I think that there's a good, healthy mix of those people, the companies that are figuring that out now, right? Everybody was like, how fast, and we still hear it, how fast can you get me results? Because we help businesses grow. And it's like, okay, how fast can you get me the results on what you want? It's like, okay, we can get you the results. And we first need to understand some things before we can make that happen. Because we don't want to just throw spaghetti at the wall, like you said, pray and spray, and hope that we're going to get you the results you want. And I love that you're sharing the whole thing about taking the time to plan, because with AI, we're just hearing how can we move faster? Because if we're not moving fast, we're going to miss the boat. And there's a healthy balance between moving fast and also making sure that we're moving fast in a very intentional way that is going to get you to that end goal that you have. Like, I have clients, and I'm sure you do too, where it's like, okay, I want to do this. Okay, well, what's the end goal of why we're going to do this? Because if we don't have a plan in place or an end goal in place, then we don't want to just do this to do it because somebody said this is a great idea, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, you see, or maybe not, but the statistics out there about how many, even in enterprises, right, into very mature companies with a lot of money and a lot of resources, how many of their AI initiatives fail. And it is in the larger percentages. And so, for smaller companies who don't have the resources, I think you could just extrapolate that, right? And so, it just gets back. There's an interesting phrase in French business culture. Again, we work with a lot of foreign companies, and they say, we guarantee the method, we don't guarantee the results. And I love that, because it truly is, in what you do, Heidi, and what we do, we've been doing this for a very long time. We've spent a lot of time, energy, and effort in the method, in proving out how something works, how it's going to work for a particular company in a particular industry those are things that are always unique, and you can't really guarantee results, but you can guarantee the method, which I think is pretty an interesting saying.
Absolutely. So what strategies, tactics, or approaches are working best for you all with USA LaunchingPad right now?
Again, I think for us, focusing on, specialization and ecosystem partnerships. Like we talked about early on, like many companies, we tried to explain everything that we could do, but what we learned is that growth accelerates when you become incredibly clear about the problem that you solve, and the transformation you create. And so today we position ourselves very specifically around helping companies reduce risk and accelerate speed of US market expansion. And, with partnerships, we've built really strong relationships with accelerators and economic development organizations and innovation hubs and even venture ecosystems around the world in places like Switzerland and the UK and Singapore and Eastern Europe. And those partnerships are incredibly valuable because they create trusted pathways into the US market for founders who may not yet have networks and customers and or operational experience here. And I would say sort of a third thing we're doing is really building repeatable systems internally. Again, to focus back on the AI things. We're leveraging automation and AI. And so those three things together are what we're doing now that I think is really helping us move the business forward.
So, well, you mentioned how you're using AI now and what's working and not working. Are there certain things that you've tried or even whether it's marketing or AI that just hasn't worked for you? You're like, we tried it, it just didn't get us the results that we wanted.
Yeah, it's incredible, especially in the area of demand generation. There are new tools and new companies coming out, seems monthly, that have built a new mousetrap. And we have migrated several times in our own tech stack because a new capability has come to market, and it really becomes like this arms race. And so what I say is, where we have been, I think, fortunately successful is in building a modular tech stack to support demand generation that can easily be modified, input the latest and greatest when it's there. And one of the things, to also consider in any of this automation is a lot of the pricing schematics of some of these, AI platforms are tokenized. And the more you use it, the more you pay. And that's often something that we've seen both for ourselves and for several of our customers that is under indexed, right? It's, oh, this costs X. And as you start implementing it in a major way, it becomes X to the third. It just really, really explodes in cost. And so understanding that cost component, I think, is also very, very important. And we got a little burned by it a couple of times. And all of a sudden, we're a relatively small company. You open up your credit card statement and you're like, what? How did and so I think those are the things to consider, right? And that's some of what we've done and some of what we've learned along the way.
Yeah, I'm there with you. It just happened yesterday and today. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like these AI tools are amazing. I just wish they wouldn't tokenize them, because you can go through so many, all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I've only been using this for a few days and I've already gone through my limit.
Tokens for the month. Yeah, exactly.
This was supposed to last 30 days. That's not possible.
Right. So I have to go to the enterprise plan, but I'm not an enterprise. What?
Exactly. I feel the pain, Matt. So question for you, if I could hand you a magic wand and you can wave it over one challenge, you've talked about your challenges, you've talked about how you're growing, the things that are working. If I could give you a magic wand and wave it over one issue that you're having right now that you could go poof and it disappears, it goes away, what would that be and why?
Yeah, this is unfortunately, I think it's very specific to what we do, but it is friction in the sales process around the ability to pay. And it's not necessarily, it's more, I will rephrase that, the desire to pay. Startup support ecosystems around the world are really robust. In the US, it's private backed. We have VCs that do a lot of the funding, but in other regions throughout the world, a lot of the efforts are subsidized by governments. And so for us, we are a fee-based service provider. And so if I could eliminate the friction to the desire to pay, and I mean, Heidi, I've got ROI that can show you specifically you're going to save $500,000 in 6 to 18 months of time, and yet spending 25,000 euro on a program is still a challenge because the prevailing mentality is this stuff is paid for. And, that's the great thing about the US is, we are a very self-sufficient ecosystem, right? And but for us specifically, that is one of our biggest challenges. And so, like I said, we've developed a lot of these partnerships, these economic development agencies around the world, these innovation hubs. They really do wonderful things for the ecosystem. And so partnering with them has addressed that issue somewhat for us. But for me as a sales leader in my day, when and I know how great our ROI is, to have friction around the desire to pay is hard for me. And interestingly enough, for us, if we get second and third time founders, when we get second and third time founders, that friction disappears because they know they've had the experience, they get it, they recognize, what we can do for them. But those first time founders, that's the hard part. So I would love that magic wand, Heidi. Please send it my way. I would.
Person asked for it. I think we might be pivoting our business to create this magic wand because everybody seems to want it. I'm just kidding. If I could create the magic wand, believe me, I'll create it and give it to you. So Matt, are you open, since you mentioned the ROI that you can provide and you have provided for many businesses, are you open to sharing a success story that really highlights the transformation and results that your clients experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting, just to top of mind, we just had a cohort come through that was a collaboration with the Scottish government. And one of the companies was a tech company that built a platform to modernize, digitize, and streamline the permitting and licensing processes for companies. And as they went through our program, we recognized pretty quickly that in the US, they were a GovTech play and not an enterprise play. And, they will tell you it's saved them years of unsuccessful market entry to recognize that how they should go to market in the US is through a GovTech play as opposed to straight to enterprise. And the reason being, dependent on the type of enterprise. So if you were let's say like a 7-Eleven type retail chain, and you have to get building permits, you're carrying hot food, you have liquor. I mean, just think, and each municipality you went into was unique, and you had to, and that's why the process is so ripe for, digitization and enhancement. But for them, that's one vertical. But then you talk about a waste management company, and now you're talking everything to do with vehicles, everything to do with the waste itself. And so every industry that they went into had very specific and particular needs. And so you either had to be very, very niche focused on an industry, or, as we found through the programming, a lot of these municipalities have specific mandates to make the permitting and licensing easier for their constituents. And part of that is digitization. And that's the pivot that happened through the program. And for them, they'll tell you it saved them years. So just a random ROI that's top of mind today.
It's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. A couple more questions for you before I let you go. Visibility wise, marketing wise, can you share with us, like, how are you getting out there? How are your clients finding you? Is it a lot of referral base? Is it boots on the ground? Is it more like paid methods? Like, what are you doing that's allowing your ideal client to find you?
Yeah, we have a mix. We do a mix of multiple marketing strategies. So outbound demand gen at scale, referrals, absolutely, ecosystems, partnerships, trade shows, as well as paid. So we have 4 pillars that we work within, and these are the same 4 pillars that we work with our clients in. And so, brand awareness is key. So, that first one, demand generation at scale, helps with awareness. Today, you also need to consider a lot of people are doing search on AI platforms. And so you need domain authority, right, as one of the key ingredients to being found, right? And so we're working pretty diligently on that. That's an offshoot of SEO, right? Because people aren't just going to Google and saying search
Right.
anymore. They're going to ChatGPT or Claude and doing a bunch of that. And so we have a healthy mix of all of them. I am finding, oddly, this is my personal experience, but trade shows are back. I think during
Good to
COVID,
know.
we thought that they were, they were going to go the way of the dodo, so to
Thought
speak.
they were the dinosaur, right?
And we just this year we've been, in the past 12 months, we've been very heavily in the trade show circuit for what we do, and there are a bunch of great shows globally. And I think, oddly, my interpretation is that with the rise of AI and everything that you could do digitally, there's almost the pendulum swing to human relationships and really getting out there and meeting people in person is really, really, really beneficial. So those are the 4 pillars we're doing. And paid works, but paid, again, back to sort of that tokenization realization that you have, right? All of a sudden, a keyword search can start costing thousands and thousands of dollars very quickly. So you have to be super focused on the paid aspect of brand outreach.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned the humanization of the space and getting back into in-person events and just meeting people face to face, because I think AI is fantastic. It's not going anywhere. So we need to embrace it. We get to embrace it, and we get to look at it and go, okay, how can this best support us? Meanwhile, we're still not moving. We're not moving into a cave and into a hole. We still need to be getting out there and having and building those relationships. The network is still your net worth. That's not going to go away anytime soon. Anyway, I don't think. I think AI is just amplifying that need for people to connect and to build those relationships even more. The hustle culture is kind of going away as far as the online hustle. And now it's getting back to the basics of like, okay, how do I meet people face to face, build those relationships, and get that know, like, and trust factor going? So we can combine the ease and automation of AI with that relation building, humanization, keeping those connections going, and building that business from both sides of the coin.
I love it. And I think you should trademark that saying if you haven't already. Your network is your net worth. I love that. I've never heard it before. Maybe
You never
I'm
heard
living
it
in a cave.
before?
No,
Wow.
I might be
I
living in
did
a
not
cave, but
coin
I think
that. I did.
it's
That is, yeah, it's been tried and true for a long time. I've heard it. So I'm glad I brought something new to you and value
you
to you
did.
today. So that makes me happy.
I love it,
So
Heidi. Thank you very much. And this was
absolutely.
wonderful. Thank you for the conversation, and thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you for your time and conversation. And we're not letting you go yet, because I want you to share how everybody that's listening can connect with you and learn more about your USA Launchpad to meet you and to learn more about the company so they can work with you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Heidi. So, our website, usalaunchingpad.com, a great way. Click on info and learn more, and you can reach out to us that way. I'm available on LinkedIn, always very active. So please drop me a DM or an email, say hello. Happy to share some of my experience. And if you are actually in the market to expand into the US, or even for foreign companies expanding internationally, I've done that most of my career. Happy to share some of my knowledge.
Awesome. Well, it's Matt DiMarsico. Go connect with him. We have all of his links inside the show notes, so make sure you go there. So if you're driving, don't worry, we got you. But go connect with him. He's a great guy, as you can tell, super friendly. He'd love to hear from you. And go check out
usalaunchingpad.com.
Sorry about that. usalaunchingpad.com. And if you're watching us on YouTube, Matt and I say hello. Thank you for being here with us. If you know of anybody that would benefit from hearing this conversation and hearing Matt and learning more about USA Launchingpad, please go share this interview with them, this conversation. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, we thank you. If you're so inclined to leave a review, we would love 5 stars. And I ask that because it allows the platform to share this episode with more people. And we want as many people as we can to hear Matt and learn more about USA Launchingpad, because he's spending his time sharing with us, being generous and sharing what's worked for him, what's not working for him, how he's grown, how he's got to where he is today. We want to support him by giving back and sharing this episode and him with as many people as we can. So if you know of anybody that could learn more about what they can do to help them grow, please share this with them. Thank you, Matt, for your time today. I appreciate you and your time. Is there anything before I let you go that I didn't get to ask you or we didn't touch on today that you want to share?
No, this was it was a great conversation. I appreciated the time and the questions. You're a great interviewer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You're a great guest. So thank you for taking your time out of your busy day. Thank you all for listening to us today on the Business Growth Spotlight. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.